we good to go? Kelly, do you need to start the meeting? Are you good?
Yes.
Okay. It started 5 minutes ago, huh? All right. Good afternoon. We will call to order the special meeting of the City Commission for Tuesday, October 12th. City Clerk, if you'd call the roll.
Mayor Owen.
Here.
Vice Mayor Sachs.
Here.
Commissioner Hartman.
Here.
Commissioner Colodi.
Here.
Commissioner McGurk.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Public participation. Would either of you like to speak? Now's your chance. Don't be shy. We thought for a minute we might have forgot to unlock the doors out there. Nobody.
I know. I was
thought there'd be
expecting
more people.
Hordes of people.
I know, yeah.
Mayor, City Commission, first I want to, Randy Herman, 108 Esther Street. I want to thank you for making this opportunity to opening this up to the public, which is such an important issue. And I have to admit, I'm really green about this whole issue. Having heard about it, read about it, and talked about it, I've never really dug into it. So I just have a few comments really to make as an interested citizen and probably quite on the periphery of really knowing all the ins and outs of it. But I guess this presents an opportunity, not guess, it is an opportunity for our city to do some exciting things that are so important. And I was trying to think of an analogy, and you know, when you see your tablecloth kind of rumpled, you can just kind of pull it a little bit on edges and straighten it out, or you can lift it up and flap it and shake it and put it down again. And I guess that's kind of what we're facing. Do we do just a little incremental kinds of changes, or do we really look at the map and consider what it means? As I understand it, and I might be wrong, but the goal of this is to enhance the quality and fairness of representation and provide near equal populations by redrawing or maintaining electoral district boundaries after the reapportionment based on the census. So it's quite a task. I sort of see New Smyrna Beach right now almost a tale of two cities, with our western Zone 4 galloping ahead population. I was shocked by how much the population has grown in Zone 4. It truly is a gigantic shift, which has implications, obviously. Having been on the neighborhood council and looked at our concepts of neighborhoods, we have 24 that we've designated. I'm not sure they really reflect any longer a viable distinction in our city. And I question whether they're really helpful. We do have some indication of organic neighborhoods evolving, such as the Coronado Island and the most recent Riverside Garden District, but they don't match our neighborhood districts that we have. So I'm not sure that those districts or those neighborhood boundaries are very useful anymore. And the other thing that's kind of interesting to me is the contradiction that commissioners are representing a specific zone, and yet the whole city votes for you. And so it's sort of like you're our representative, but in a way, you're a representative of the whole city, not necessarily my zone. So that in itself is sort of contradictory to me and maybe worth talking about. And then, of course, the ever danger of gerrymandering, which comes with any kind of redistricting issue. So I guess one of the questions is, what are the criteria that you'll consider? And I don't know, these are just a few. Contiguity, of course, compactness, existing geographical features like our river, respecting communities of interest, and political fairness are just some of the things I assume that you'll be looking at. And to close out, for example, should Zone 1, Beachside, be divided? There could be an argument that Zone 1 should be the entire Beachside. So I just offer that. I really wish you well in your deliberations, and I will be as intrigued as you all as the outcome. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Come ahead.
Hello, I'm Sandy Compton, and I live at 325 North Causeway. And I've been interested in what goes on in the city, and it's a small city, and I feel like individuals can make a difference. I was working and taking care of elderly people, and now I've retired and they've passed, and so I'm here just to see what goes on and how it works and try to get more involved in the city government.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being here. Tonight we're going to talk about redistricting. At the first meeting, we got two more to follow. All right, that being all the public present, we'll assume that public participation is finished. And Brian, you want to kick it off and introduce this? I want to set the stage a little bit, and you may be going to touch on this, but gentlemen, we're not obviously going to decide districts tonight. We're really kind of deciding on the process. How do we want to approach this? What are the challenges we see? What are the major objectives for each of us? That we want to see staff and how we want to work through this process. So to me, is the main kind of objective of tonight. So just to set that very, very clear before he even goes, that we're not by the end of this voting on, oh yeah, here's the new districts. This is all done. I mean, if you're feeling the Wheaties, I guess we can try that tonight. But all right, go ahead.
So just a brief overview of the rules and some of the data as a kickoff to redistricting. The rules are in the charter. States there'll be 4 commission zones, and it states for every census, the city has to redraw the boundaries. There's really 4 criteria that apply. First is that they're equal in population, and any deviation cannot be more than 5% of the average. Zones have to be drawn to keep neighborhoods intact. The third, zones shall consist of contiguous territory, and there's some detail that follows there. And then last, the aggregate length of all zone boundaries shall be as short as possible. So that is the fairly simple criteria. The procedures are also outlined in the charter. It has to be done within 6 months of the official publication of the census. This is a little unclear for us because we have not received the official data from the Census Bureau. However, that data is available. It's on the census website. Volusia County has it. The data that we have that we presented is from the county. We're fairly certain that is very accurate for planning purposes, but until we get that envelope, our clock doesn't necessarily start. The plans have to be available to the public for at least 1 month prior to the first public hearing. The commission has to adopt by a vote of 3 members of the commission. If you fail to adopt the plan, it goes to the city attorney, to a circuit court to make a reapportionment. And then lastly, the redrawing of the zones do not affect the remaining terms of the presently elected officials. So even if a member was, after reapportionment, was outside of that zone, he or she would finish the term and then would not be able to run for re-election within that zone if they were outside of it. So just a quick look at the data, just looking back in time a little bit. This was last done here in 2011. Our population was just over 22,000 at that time. So you had averages of about 5,600 in each of the 4 zones. A lot of white space back then that's been filled in by annexation, which we'll see in a minute, but that was the lay of the land in 2011. Fast forward to here's where we are today with the new data that's available. So you have zones 1 and 2 on the beach side, very moderate growth, some growth in zone 3, and substantial growth in zone 4. So that's the lay of the land today. Just a couple data points to keep in mind. We looked at specifically Venetian Bay and what's the total population there, and it's about 4,500. So that's 2020 data. Venetian Bay is filling in. At some point, that western area may have enough population to be its own zone in itself. So a couple other points here. Let me wrap up, check my notes, make sure I cover everything. One item in particular, Commissioner Colodi pointed this out, and we noticed this too, is that Zone 1 does not appear, or it's a gray area, whether it meets the being contiguous criteria. So that's something, I'm not sure how they interpreted that at the time because the same rules were in effect, I believe. But something we would probably seek to correct as part of the new map. There's many scenarios available from very minor adjustments, which logically would appear to pushing zones 1 and 2 into taking population from 4 to rebalance. Zone 3 is about where it needs to be. The overall average would be about 7,600 with the current map. So Zone 3 is almost there today.
What was that number? 7,600?
7,628 is the current what would be the exact average in the 4 zones. So if Zone 3 is 7858 is just over that amount. So, we've already played around with the numbers a little bit. You can make some very common sense adjustments and get to that balance. You can do more substantial redrawing and, really look at a totally different way of doing this. It's fairly easy for staff to run numbers. If we have a public meeting, even floated the idea of having our GIS person here in real time to say, hey, if we move this area here, what does that do to the balance? We can do that fairly quickly. So it's not a huge staff endeavor to create many scenarios here. In 2011, we looked back at what was done then. Not a lot of research, not a lot of data. They had a meeting in May of 2011 where staff presented 4 scenarios. And then those were debated by the commission in a special meeting. And they voted, and those came back to an ordinance in June of 2011. I'm not sure about the neighborhood meetings and public outreach prior to that in 2011. I'm sure there was some work done, but that was kind of the actual procedural steps that were taken. Special meeting by the commission, and then 2 readings of the ordinance. A couple things to keep in mind as far as discussion topics tonight is first is the timing, is whether you want this to be effective for the 2022 election. So just keep in mind we've got public meetings, preparing the ordinance, actually having it on the books with that process. I mentioned the 2011 cycle, and then whether you want to schedule public meetings either here or going out into the districts would be something to factor in. And then any long-term considerations, whether looking ahead to plan for perhaps adding 2 more zones for the 2030 cycle or sometime prior to that is something that is valuable input at this time. So that's the extent of my discussion. I'll turn it over to the commission. I'll sit down.
Hang on, Brian, before you go. We got a couple of questions. I got one. I know Commissioner McGurk has one, probably others. The 6 months, can you go back a couple of slides on the requirements thing? They're out there. Yeah, that 6 months from the official publication of the census. I mean, is that imminent? Is it going to happen? Like, do we have any idea of when that's going to be?
It should be soon. The counties got their data in August and September in the larger cities. We're the small cities are the last step. We don't know why we don't have it yet. So and that's a maximum. So
yeah. So I mean, it could really be any day from now. Let's just say.
Soon. And
so when you say one of the discussion points is timing and effectiveness for the 2022 election, because of that, I mean, if we get it any day now, we've got to put this in place within 6 months. Can we then make sure I understand that in particular?
So once we get the data, we have 6 months to adopt new zones. I'll defer to Carrie as far as whether that has to be in effect for the 2022 or that can carry forward.
I guess what drives that? Is that state level? Is that our charter? Or is there room for interpretation?
Well, our charter says complete the reapportionment plan within 6 months. So if we get it in the next day or two, I think this could easily be completed in 4 months. I think the actual adoption process is going to be at least 2 because you have to have the public meeting 30 days before the month of an ordinance.
Yeah.
So that would leave us with, kind of more public outreach in that 3rd month, and then depending on how much additional meetings you'd like to set in the first 2.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm sure the commission will discuss it, but I guess the issue is that, if it's 6 months, I mean, at some point, we kind of have to know, because candidates would need to know if they want to file for office, they got to know, are they eligible to file? Is their zone up for election this time, et cetera? Whether that be candidates sitting up here or candidates that are, out there wanting to run. That it doesn't feel fair to do, to pass at the last minute and all of a sudden now a candidate's not in the right zone, or, what I'm saying. So, but this 6 month cutoff feels like we just have to do it at the 6 month mark, I guess. So
it doesn't say it says you have to have the plan in place within 6 months after official publication. So the conservative read would be the ordinance needs to be adopted by that, but you could have the delayed effective date if you wanted to, like Brian suggested.
Okay.
So if we don't get it until June or July, that obviously impacts elections, and then it would
Right.
take effect.
Okay. You had a question too?
Yeah, that was one of my questions. So, if I understand correctly, one interpretation is, when Brian was saying we have it within 6 months, but we can then, you're saying defer the effective date to, if we wanted to, the 2024 election, not the 2022 election. We're not required to have it in place and activated in that manner within 6 months.
Correct. There's an argument for that. If the data comes in the next month, I'd say we can easily get this done for current cycle.
2022.
Right.
And of
So my
course-
preference would be to have it effective immediately in the 2022, but if we had to go to the 2024, we could.
Okay. Brian, you said that, and I don't think I understood it correctly. You mentioned a zone cannot change by more than 5% or something about 5%, which triggered me if, for example, there was, so I need you to restate that so I can
Sure.
understand. Let me
So
let you do that.
the average would be 7628 per zone. You don't have to be at exactly 7628 as long as you're within 5% of each other.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions for Brian before we'll obviously come back to him, but any other things to clarify? Good. Did you have something?
No, I'm
Oh,
good.
I thought you were shaking.
No.
I thought you were shaking your head. You did. Jake, yes.
Yes, Brian, I don't know if you or Carrie can answer this question. It did arise that I wonder if it's addressed in the charter. If you have a zone that is connected by a causeway, but that connection goes through someone else's zone or another zone, has that been changed in the charter? Are there any changes?
So when you have land that is separated by waterways, you're supposed to have both terminus of the bridge in the same zone,
Okay.
termini.
Chances are, I don't know how far back you looked at the previous decision that was made in 2011. Am I right? The last sentence.
Yeah.
Did they address issues like that? Because it seems like Commissioner Colodey's zone
Yeah.
go through mine and then goes back.
Yeah, and that,
So-
and to me, I mean, it is what it is, and we're changing it now. So I don't want to relitigate with
The south side
what
of
they
the
did.
bridge is in Jake's, and the north side of the bridge
Bridge is
is on, so mine does that with, you have Fairgreen. Randy has the
north.
south side.
Yeah.
And I have the north side of the street. And so that's how you would probably interpret this. You would have the south side of the bridge, and Mike would have the north side of the bridge. So technically, it's contiguous.
Yeah.
That's a way to work it.
Anyway,
Well, I
we're
mean, I'm
Yeah.
willing to bet that's how they got it.
that's yeah. And I'm sure there were challenges, just like I'm sure we will face. Of here's the deal, gentlemen. That 5%, which is in our charter, that's not a lot. I mean, 5% of 7,600 is we're down to 350, 70-ish people. That's not a lot of tolerance. I mean, that's a street, that's a neighborhood. So this is going to end up. I feel like we're going to. It's going to have something that, this makes sense, but it's not quite within tolerances, and so now we got to go pick up another street here or something like that. So, all right, gentlemen. So let's have some discussion. Maybe we'll just come down the row, and the thought process here, the decisions you heard staff is looking for. Really, what do we want our process to look like? How do we want to approach this, and other comments or thoughts on what you heard. So, Commissioner Colodey.
Well, on the connectability issue, our previous charter said it could be over water. So the zone was correct at the time. Now it doesn't say that. It's got to be connected by land, which really is no big deal because it's pretty close. Second thing, and one thing that Brian didn't mention, is It's very strict that you don't adjust your zones to create negative impact on minorities, some particular type of group, whether it be Asians or whatever it is. You can't do that anymore. And we have the historic West Side. Whatever we do, we should try to keep that intact. Right now, about 90% is in one zone and 10% is in another zone. So practically speaking, that's a block of quite a few people, 1,100 people. So that's got to be taken into effect when we do that. As a person who loves maps, I've looked at the maps. I've asked a couple questions of Brian, and that issue could be solved pretty readily with a couple other minor adjustments. We won't have any zones that look like they were gerrymandered, which Zone 1 looks like now, even though that's not true. So I think we'll have to put some thoughts into that. Personally speaking, I am going to run again, so I do have an interest in where the zones are. I get elected by everybody in the town, so what zone they're in, as long as they realize that they can vote for different people, we should make that very clear. So for me, it doesn't matter who's in, who's out of my zone. I don't think we should displace another commissioner out of their zone. I just think that's the wrong thing to do. But I have all kinds of opinions, and I'm willing to get to them, but let somebody else speak.
Okay, yeah, and we got 20 minutes here, so Vice Mayor, initial thoughts.
Yes, Commissioner Colodi brings up a few good points. I'd like us to get deeper into this process. Frankly, doesn't matter if you run for office, everybody votes for you. I think we should make that superbly clear, because it was not. Through the last 2 election cycles, people didn't know that they could vote for people outside their zone. So I think our ad campaign, i.e. Phil, or whoever does our information campaign, should make that abundantly clear. And other than that, bringing up the historic West Side, it completely lies in a zone, except for, I think, there was a part along the railroad tracks that may lie in Zone 2, my zone. But I wonder as to the population. I would need some help from staff to find that out. And again, I don't know what difference it makes as long as we don't gerrymander or appear to gerrymander. I don't think we would do that anyway. But, sorry?
Go ahead. I'm going to talk about that.
Again, I have nothing more to say at this time.
Okay. I want to be clear. I'm going to come to Commissioner McGurk here, but because we all vote on every issue and all citizens vote for every commissioner, this notion of gerrymandering is where you draw a zone so that a favorable political party affiliations align. So you have a zone where you take all of the blue party and you make sure they're kind of in one zone, and then you draw this weird zone to put all the red party in a zone so that you can make sure you have representation, even though all of the blue party may outnumber the red party 5-1, but you can gerrymander it in such a way that you get somebody in. That's not a factor here, for lack of a better term. And everyone up here votes on every issue, and every citizen votes for everyone that sits up here. So there really isn't that. That's not a chief concern of mine, because there's no one up here has any motive to do anything in that vein. So.
Yeah, you're 100% correct in that. I don't think anybody up here really cares about that. Yeah. But the public does.
No, I agree.
There's plenty of people out there that I don't want to even give them.
Yeah, no, I know. That's why the term has come up a few times. So we want to make sure as we talk through this process, the public understands that's really, we're using that term, but there's not even an opportunity for it. Even if we wanted to, it literally doesn't exist. Commissioner McGurk.
Thank you, Mayor. You nailed what I wanted to mention. Randy Herman mentioned it. The key to a citywide vote, which I will always support forever, is that you can't gerrymander districts on a citywide vote. The only thing you can try to manipulate is someone lives in a certain district, which is really not a big deal, but it's not gerrymandering a district. Anytime someone wants to talk about going from a citywide vote to district votes, then you open up the can of worms to gerrymandering, which I think, for all intents and purposes, everybody doesn't want to mess with.
And that's driven by the charter anyway. That's not something we would change anyway. That would be a charter review type thing, so yeah.
But I wanted to answer
Yeah.
Mr. Herman's question because he brought that up, and I think it's really important that the groups and organizations out there understand that very specific. You can't gerrymander districts if you have citywide votes, and that's why I will always support citywide votes in our community. So I look at this and I say, everybody's been very, very polite, and I'm like, okay, let me get into this thing. I don't have a strong opinion on any of this, other than we don't remove any sitting commissioners out of their zones. I think the historical West Side has always been in Zone 4. It may be difficult to keep that simply because the massive growing population and its proximity to zones 1, 2, and 3. So the question is, how do we keep the integrity of that West Side in a zone and not break it up? So I think I agree with Commissioner Colodi a lot on that. So one thing I want to raise, which is when we have 4 zones, it would seem relatively easy to me if you have Beachside as one zone. You have 3 and 4 that touch each other and come out to the west as needed. The problem with that is that wouldn't work for the goal of keeping both, making sure both Beachside commissioners do not get taken out of their district when they intend to run again. And that's a great alignment, unless and until we ever try to annex Silver Sands, Bethune, and then you would probably need 2 districts on Beachside. So it gets I've looked at the map. I just wanted to raise that. I'm not necessarily for that, but that is one of the elephants in the room that I just wanted to bring up. I didn't want anybody, it's like the third rail, you can't touch it. But it would seem to make sense to have Beachside 1 district and then 2, 3, and 4 in this, I'm making an assumption, but 1 and then 2 and 3. I don't know how you encroach across to the mainland without awkwardly creating districts. Going back to what Randy Herman said, we have all these neighborhoods. And how do you have a neighborhood, a district commissioner to focus in a neighborhood that you can have 2 fundamentally opposite ones? For example, you have the highest real estate prices in one district and the lowest real estate prices in one district. And the question is, does that matter? And I don't know, but I don't know how you come across and keep these and have something that makes sense. But on the other hand, we're a citywide vote, and as the mayor and I were just talking about this before this started, usually people want to speak to the mayor anyway. So regardless of what the districts are, we can just keep that model and make sure that the mayor vets everything.
I'll second that.
We are not calling for a vote.
So, I think having Beachside as 1 district would be too radical, too significant a change. Then the question is, okay, well, how do we break up District 3 and 4 to accommodate the growth? So 1 and 2 have equal populations, and other than just simply, you're going to have something that looks like a jigsaw puzzle to be able to get those numbers to work. I don't necessarily see how that would not work. would not create some jigsaw puzzles trying to encompass some populations that are needed to be within that 5%.
Okay. And I just want to be clear for sunshine purposes, Commissioner McGurk and I were not talking about this before the meeting. We were talking about when a citizen reaches out and they want to talk to me, and we were talking about the advantages of being a zone commissioner versus mayor. So I wasn't talking about city business. Commissioner Hartman.
So the elephant in the room is whether or not Jake's going to run again, because Commissioner Colodi said he's running. So if he would care to share or not, that could make a difference in how the process works. Because if he wasn't planning on running, then we wouldn't be displacing someone to make it beachside. I'm in favor. I would like to see beachside as all one zone. I think they all have the same issues, and I think that it would be better for that zone commissioner to be focused on those types of issues. But the problem was, Brian says he's going to have to come a little bit over to grab a few numbers. That won't give him enough numbers. So the other question I had was, are these permanent residents or just bodies? Because even if we annex some of Bethune and stuff, we may not get the numbers as permanent residents, because a lot of that is rental properties or condos, or they don't permanently live here. So the census is based on permanent residents. So, we have to kind of take a little bit of that in consideration too. Just because there's a lot of rooftops doesn't mean there's a lot of voters. You follow me? So I would truly be in favor of having this completed for the 22 election. I think it's important that we focus on that and try to get that done. I would like to see beachside as all one zone. But again, not knowing what Jake's intentions are, that's going to be kind of hard to do unless he would care to divulge that. And it really doesn't affect me other than I'm losing people. And as you can see, I have lots of little pockets that, would keep neighborhoods contiguous that really wouldn't affect certain neighborhoods or certain areas. So, and the other thing is, you can see that Jason and I both grew over the last 10 years. I can bet the numbers would be different today than that, because this was 2020. And, in another 5 years, we could easily be another 2,000 people, in each of our zones. So if we're going to draw this, do we keep that in the back of our minds that in 10 years we're going to have to do it again, and do we want to try to make that not us but somebody make that an easier process for somebody in the future, or are we just worried about this next 10 years and let the future worry about the future?
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
So the elephant in the room would like to know what's the rationale for combining Zone 1 and 2?
The rationale is to combine beachside into all one zone. It's not either whatever you call which one beachside, whether it's one or two, with the other moving more into the city center and that pocket area in the middle. So unfortunately, you have two city commissioners that both live in the beachside area. So, I mean, that's what's at issue.
That's debatable, but
So yeah, it's the issue is whether or not, ideally, and several people have talked to me, well, why isn't beachside all one zone? And currently that's not the way it's set up. And if we tried to do that, one of you would be displaced, and I don't think that's an intention of anybody. So just going forward, as Brian mentioned, they preliminary have the numbers, so it should be a fairly quick process once we kind of determine what those exact numbers are. He said basically they could just move the map, the line on the map, and it automatically give us numbers and stuff. So it shouldn't be a fairly long process once we get through this initial phase.
Okay.
if you were to combine zones, just for discussion's sake, combine the beach side, isn't that an inordinate population there, which could only be rectified by quite a bit of time?
We'd be constricting, I think if you just took the beach side, but you took out all of, the section here, if you can see where I'm kind of pointing, this, and then all this little stuff, if you just put all that in one area. I don't know, Brian, what would that look like if you kind of just looked from the river to the ocean? What's that number?
Sure. We ran those numbers. It's about 8,300, all of beachside plus everything on the causeways.
Yeah.
You could get to our number today by adding the North Causeway area to the beachside. You almost hit it real close.
Gotcha.
So that would be a potential zone.
So there is a potential path forward. So a couple of things. I'm going to share my thoughts, and then want to talk about how we approach this, like how the next step. So. I think I disagree a little bit that an objective should be to not displace anyone. I worry about trying to map things in such a way that it just doesn't displace someone that's sitting here now. And my concern with that is that just becomes a bit arbitrary, for lack of a better term. Meaning, and I know I have I'm the one person that you can run from any zone, so I'm maybe the one person that can say this, but it's not that I would want to do that intentionally, but I worry about going into the process with that as an underlying objective, and us having that unnecessarily influence how this is laid out. That being said, I'm also not overly convinced. I mean, here's the deal. Magnolia Street was an issue that was in your zone, but we all sat through the hours and hours of meetings, and we all talked to those residents numerous other times after meetings, before meetings. Like, it doesn't. The zone makeup doesn't matter as much with the way we do business. I haven't seen the zone makeup to just be tremendously radically important. So I don't want to overthink it, I guess is my point. When I think about this, if I assume everyone is, we're never running again, if I were just laying this out, my kind of primary objective was this, as I thought about it. How do we get neighborhoods of like concern? So if you think about it that way, all of the folks on Beachside, if I rang up someone in North Beach and on 17th Avenue on a sunny Sunday afternoon, they're going to have the exact same issue they want to talk to me about, more than likely. And, same goes for, the kind of the western growth and some neighborhoods out there. A person in Venetian Bay, their concerns are very different than someone that's living over there almost at the railroad tracks. We have these kind of weird fingers in the way it's done. If it were me, and I don't know if the numbers would work, but I think it'd be fascinating to see a north-south alignment. And I've talked with staff briefly about this, but a north-south alignment. Take zone 1 and say it went, or 2. I don't care the numbers, but take a zone A, and run from the beach, from ocean to river, and then take zone B and run from river to like Old Mission or somewhere around there, kind of taking that US 1 corridor. Because if you go to US 1 from the north to the south, they have similar concerns. The neighborhoods that are in between US 1 and the river, they all feel and look very similar all the way up and down the area. And then take from Mission to about 95, somewhere around there, and then kind of 95 west. Like, that's it. Unfortunately, I don't think it works out with the population. But that's how I would think of it from a neighborhood of like concerns. But I don't think that works. I mean, is the downside. So I'm a bit agnostic on this. So let's focus on how we approach this. My thought would be, we've done a little bit of it, but we go through one more time. We give staff kind of is there anything we're overly concerned about? So we heard one with Historic West Side. We've heard a few other things. So let's give staff kind of our primary objectives of what we're trying to do, what we think are the priorities, and then I would propose we let staff come back at a future special meeting and bring us three, if you get too many options, you kind of, it's hard to make a final decision. So I would say, 2, 3, no more than 4 probably. Have staff come back and bring us some options and say, we feel these are 3 or 4 options that meet what we heard was the objective of the commission at this meeting. And then we can kind of decide and discuss and debate from there. Maybe we take one but tweak it, or maybe we are able to pick one and say, yep, that's the one. And to me, if we're able to do that fairly expeditiously and we get the data, the official data, there's no reason we couldn't have this in place by 2022. I don't see a reason to not do it by 2022 unless we don't get the data. Now, what I wouldn't want to do is this kind of drags out and we leave anyone in limbo, because it takes a bit to mount a campaign. And so if we're not talking about having this finalized and you have some major motion, to me, if we can't have it wrapped up by May of 2022, I think somewhere around May or June would kind of be the cutoff. Like if we can't have it be known by then we shouldn't have it effective in the 2022 election, because that's just not enough time to kind of have someone know and mount a campaign if they chose to do it. Would that be someone sitting here or someone that wants to run? So I'll come back down the line real quick and get everyone's kind of thoughts and blessings on that plan. Staff, anything that I missed real quick before we go back down the line? Anything you need clarity on?
No, we're very confident the data we have is very close to the final product.
Okay.
So we're confident we can start the process, and then at some point during that process, we'll get that official confirmation, hopefully soon.
Yeah. Okay. Commissioner Clody?
I do not like the idea of one zone just on beachside.
Okay.
It's a social divide you're creating, because as we've said, beachside has particular problems. They're not independent of this town, but they are part of the town. We're elected by all people. So combining beachside as one zone, if you look back in history, that used to be a separate town.
Yeah.
We don't want to create that again. And that kind of goes along those lines. I do have pieces that are in the mainland, just as Commissioner Sachs. I get along with them very well, and one of the main purposes of having zones is having one individual that a resident can contact as a point man, other than the mayor. And I've made a lot of contacts throughout all of my zone area, and hopefully they like me and want to keep me, and I look forward to an election where they get a chance to do that. And on the subject as to when it should take effect as soon as possible, 22. There's no reason to put it off. Whether it's to my benefit or not, doesn't matter to me.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
So apparently it was written into the charter that a commissioner could be eliminated and that power could be consolidated with another zone. That to me is not kosher, okay? I mean, here we are talking about growing. We may even have to consider more commissioners, but yet we're willing to take the barrier island and make it one zone. That kind of consolidation of power I don't favor at all. I couldn't describe exactly, I don't want to distinguish the difference between peoples of 1 and 2, because they're really the same nice people that we represent. But you could just take Zone 4. You may have to do that to Zone 4, divide that up, or combine it with parts of Zone 3 at some time. So it seems kind of contrived. I don't know for what purpose that was written into the charter.
I'm not following the logic with the writing into the charter. Nothing is written in the charter about being able to eliminate it. I mean, this is a process that we have to follow for redistricting. The charter actually is very clear that nothing we do would impact a sitting commissioner. And I think you've heard most of the people up here say we're I mean, at least a couple of them, that it was a priority to not eliminate a commissioner that would be sitting. It's a factor. I wonder if it should be a primary factor or not. If there were any gerrymandering to be had, that's kind of where it would come in, is that we draw some zone to make sure the commissioner stays in its current place. I mean, frankly, I don't think anybody's up here contrived any strategy to try to, I'm saying if I just threw everybody, take all the names off the thing, take all the stars of where people live off the thing, and draw boundaries of neighborhoods with like concerns, that was all I was saying. So I just want to be very clear. The charter hasn't deemed any power. There's no changes in the charter that gave any more or less power. This is the process that's been followed every 10 years, every time there's a redistricting process. And I imagine it's always probably been exactly like this, where they have made sure that commissioners probably stayed in their area. I don't know. I've never lived through one of these, but.
So I still wonder where the thought comes from, whether I will run or not, whether we should have one zone on the beach side.
Well, pull that map back up if you would.
Well, I may answer that if you want.
Go ahead.
If you were not going to run, I would spend a lot more time paying attention to Beachside being one district. If you are going to run, I've said,
Or undecided.
I'm not inclined to break up those zones so you could run. I think that answers your last question to the mayor.
Okay.
So he's saying what you're hearing from the colleagues over here is if you are planning to run, we kind of have to leave 1 and 2 about like they are because of where, you see the stars on the map, because of where you are in that zone. We can't do a lot with zone 2 if you are planning on running. And so I think you've heard from them that they're saying if you're planning on running, then there's not a lot we can do here. We don't have a lot of room. If you are planning on running, or if you're not planning on running, then there may be some opportunities here. And whether or not that's the right thing is something that we can debate, of whether or not, the folks on 17th Avenue have similar concerns to the folks on Pine Street. I don't know. That's a debate. I can make arguments both ways. So.
Well, again, I don't need to dispute tonight whether I'll run or not, but it should not be a factor. Zone 2 should have its own representation, as it has had for I don't know how many tens of years, possibly more.
Zone 2 will have its representation.
Zone 2 is not going away.
Yeah.
The way you're saying some things, maybe we're misunderstanding. You seem to be implying that Zone 2 is going away. If Zone 2 wouldn't go away, we'd still have the 4 zones. We would just consider, if you weren't going to run, that Zone 2 wouldn't be on the beach side. That's all we're saying. But if you want to run, we wouldn't consider that. And we wouldn't consider that because we would not want to inadvertently remove a sitting commissioner and not allow that commissioner to run again if you were inclined to do so. So we're just protecting you if you wanted to run again, and if you didn't, there would be no harm, no foul, because it would be an open seat in a new district. But Zone 2 is not going away.
And let me be clear, through this, we have 10,000 people right now in Zone 4. That has to be closer to 7,600. We only have 6,000 people in current Zone 2. That has to be closer to 7,600. We have 6,000 in Zone 1. That has to be closer to 7,600, right around that number. So there will be people that currently are represented by Commissioner Hartman that at the end of this process will be represented by someone else sitting up here. There will be, there's no avoiding that there will be a shift in representation. Some giveth, some taketh. There will be changes. That's the nature of the process that we're going through here. So I'm failing to see some of the concerns.
My point is simpler than that. Again, whether I run or not, there should be 2 zones on the barrier island. There should be 2 representatives. Would you agree?
That's where I don't know that I agree with that statement, but that's fine. And that doesn't mean that's nothing personal to you. I'm saying that right now we have 3 representatives that live west of US 1. I have 1 representative that lives east of US 1. I don't know that that's right either. Like that, if I live in Venetian Bay and I find out that 3 of my elected commissioners, outside the mayor, who's a wild card, that person could pop up anywhere around the city, 3 of the elected commissioners live west of US 1, and yet I have, 50% plus of the population that lives west of US 1, and 3 of the electeds live east of US 1, do you think that's a problem? I think that's a problem. So I'm just saying we've got to look a little further outside the box than just saying this is how it's always been, therefore it's how it must be. But,
Does it make sense to, if we're growing out west more so than easterly, that the zones to the east expand west as the westerly zones grow?
Sure, if you make
Right?
all of Beachside one zone, then that other zone, call it a 1, 2 could come to the center part of the city, fill in all of the historic West Side, Corbin Park, and all the other. So you'd have more of a balance. That's all I'm saying. It gives us, if you say, no, I'm not running, it gives us options. If you're say, I don't want to say, or, I'm undecided, that's fine. That kind of limits our options. That's all I'm saying, Jake. Nobody's trying to throw you out of office. Nobody's trying to get rid of a zone. We're just trying to get some basic information so that we can proceed with the process in an orderly manner. That's it, plain and simple.
in Zone 4, actually, the westerly zones are not going to expand. The westerly zones are going to contract because that's where the growth is. So the size of Zone 4 is going to have to contract, and the other zones are going to have to expand because there has been more growth in Zone 4. I mean, that's what we're seeing right here on this map. I mean, look at the 10,000 versus the 2 6,000s. Those numbers have to go up to about 7,600 or 7,800, whatever the number was, 76. And Zone 4 has to come down to about 76. So those, the purple and the green have to get bigger. The brown has to get smaller. And well, I'm saying we can do that a million different ways. We can take and, how should we expand Zone 1? Should we continue that little finger that it's got out and just keep kind of stretching it out towards 95? And then Zone 2, should we push it out even further and let it go all the way out to, I'm just saying that if I have an objective, when one of my objectives, I've said, is to try to keep neighborhoods of like concern connected and represented by someone, that way they can really dig into the issues of that neighborhood. I mean, let's take the neighborhoods up near Owlsboro. I mean, what if we split all that up, and now all of a sudden we have 3 different commissioners that have to, really get in the weeds and understand and address airport concerns and issues that neighbors in that area raise about airport. I mean, you have nobody calling you right now about the airport, and that's as it should be. All those calls go to Jason because all of the people impacted by the airport are in his area. But that's good because that means that he has the airport on speed dial. He knows how to call them, get a hold of them. He's up to speed on that issue. Like, that's what I'm saying. I want to see issues around. We have different issues in each zone. To the extent we can try to get that concentrated into neighborhoods of like concern in a zone, it's a more efficient and effective form of representation to me. But I'm just one vote, so I'm okay either way. We can take the straightforward approach of just basically sliding 1 and 2 a little bit further west, which is the only way that we can pick up the population needed to add to those zones. So that's the other option, I guess.
Mayor, let me just say, I support what you said. I'd like to look at some options from staff, and I'd like those to be as, I'd like to see some creativeness. I'd even like to see if Commissioner Sachs is undecided, let's see what it looks like with having one district on Beachside. I know, Commissioner Colodi, you don't support that. I get that. I'm not inclined to do that, but I don't want to just ignore. I don't want to have a very narrow look at this process so we can kind of get a feel for, what can we do? Maybe we don't do it this time. Maybe it's next time. But I'd like the next meeting to have the obvious basic change, and then something that would show Beachside as one district.
All right, so go ahead.
Just last comment. I look forward to seeing various options as to how this can lay out. That's good. It's a step forward, move the process forward as quick as we can. And I think our questions that were posed by some of us to Commissioner Sachs were unseemly and shouldn't even been brought up in the issue.
Absolutely.
I actually believe that we should be agnostic to the stars on the map. I'd like to see the maps drawn without the stars of the current electeds. I think we should look at the zones for what makes sense, and then that all shakes out. I mean, I said that from the beginning. That's the most probably pure way to do it. But then we also get the concern of, that there's some ulterior motive in this, which there isn't, I don't believe, for anybody up here. So I think it was a question asked in fairness and consideration from a pure motive. So, all right, staff, I think you've heard from us. Bring us back some options. Probably another special meeting, however much time you all need. We'll probably need a little more time on that meeting, just based on this one. Just guessing. We may need a little more time. Last question for the commission real quick is, I've given some debate, I don't know if you all have or not, but, is there a way to, beyond just a public meeting like this, did we want to try to engage the public via something else? I landed on, I feel like if we start trying to appoint some extra thing, we've kind of just delegated this problem down. I don't know that that's going to solve anything, but maybe it's something to think about. If we keep going around, maybe we, do we try to involve, neighborhood council or some other already appointed board, or one that we appoint for this specific purpose to hear, not with a long-term thing, just literally like a one-day appointment, like, hey, let's get some public input. But to me, where I landed was, this is our chance to have public input, and we had 2 members of the public. So, and I think that's representative of the fact that it kind of doesn't have a huge impact. All right, we're going to adjourn the redistricting special